I need to start by telling you something that I don't lead with in real life because it tends to make people uncomfortable or sad, and I've never really wanted either of those things from people I've just met. For about 4 months when I was 24 years old, my car was my home. It was a 2009 Honda Accord. I know, a lot of Hondas in these stories, they're just reliable. Silver, with a busted passenger side mirror I'd fixed with duct tape, and a back seat that I'd become genuinely expert at arranging for sleeping. I had a gym membership at a Planet Fitness 20 minutes from the diner where I worked, which is where I showered. I had a storage unit in Tempe, Arizona, where the rest of my life lived in boxes. I had a P.O. box for mail. I had a system, is what I'm saying. People who haven't been through it sometimes imagine homelessness as chaos, but for a lot of people, especially people who are working and trying to hold a thread, it's actually the opposite. It's an exhausting, meticulous daily management of appearances and logistics, because the moment anyone finds out, your employer, your coworkers, certain customers, the thread gets cut. Nobody at the diner knew. I made sure of that. How I got there is not the most interesting part of this story, but it's necessary context. I had moved to Phoenix at 22, chasing a relationship that ended badly and expensively. I had no family nearby. I grew up in rural Indiana, parents who were decent people but with nothing to spare, financially or emotionally. I had no college degree. I had waitressing experience and a good memory for orders, and a face that people found approachable, which in the service industry is basically a trade skill. The apartment I'd been sharing with my ex became untenable for reasons I won't detail, and the Phoenix rental market in that particular year had decided to become completely unhinged. I couldn't find anything I could afford alone, and I didn't know anyone well enough to ask about splitting. So, the car. Temporarily, I told myself, just until I saved enough for a deposit. 3 weeks became 2 months, became 4. I worked doubles as often as I could get them. I was known at the diner as reliable and fast and honest about mistakes, which meant I had a decent regular clientele who tipped reasonably. I was getting by. Barely. Scraping in the way that people who are getting by barely often look completely fine from the outside if you don't look at their eyes. The diner was called Mira's, a family place. Booths with that vinyl seating that sticks to your thighs in the summer, a pie case by the register, the kind of place where the coffee is bad and people love it anyway because it comes fast and gets refilled without asking. It was a Tuesday in November. I remember that specifically because Tuesdays were slow, and I had picked up the shift as a favor to another waitress, and I was tired in the specific way that only comes from sleeping in a car in a parking lot and then working 9 hours on your feet. My last table of the night was a woman sitting alone. She was maybe 60, maybe a little older, with short silver hair and glasses on a beaded chain, and the kind of unhurried way of sitting that suggested she was either very peaceful or very wealthy, or possibly both. She ordered coffee, a slice of apple pie, and a bowl of tomato soup, which is a combination I have never judged, because soup and pie is honestly underrated. She was reading a paperback. I couldn't see the title, and she didn't need much from me. I refilled her coffee twice. I asked if the pie was okay when I noticed she'd left half of it. She smiled and said it was fine. She just had a small appetite lately. Something in the way she said lately made me not ask a follow-up question. When she left, I cleared the table. Under her coffee cup was a $50 bill, a significant tip on a check that had been maybe $12. Under the 50 was a folded napkin. I almost threw the napkin away. I thought it was a used one she'd left. But something made me unfold it, maybe because it was folded too deliberately with neat corners. Inside, in handwriting that was careful and slightly shaky, like someone who was writing slowly on purpose, it said, "You have a good face. Kindness is visible even when it's tired. Whatever you are working toward, keep going. And when you get there, pass it on. M." That was all. I stood next to the booth with a dirty coffee cup in one hand and that napkin in the other, and I cried. Not a lot. I was working, and I had gotten very good at managing tears in public, in reducing them to something that could be handled with a quick trip to the back and a paper towel pressed to the eyes. But it was real crying, the involuntary kind, because that note had walked straight past every defense I had and landed somewhere true. Someone had seen that I was tired. Someone had said I had something worth seeing. I kept the note. I put it in the glove compartment of my Accord in a small Ziploc bag I found in my trunk because I didn't want it to get soft at the creases from being handled. I read it on bad nights. I read it when the parking lot was too hot or too cold, or when someone in the adjacent space knocked on my window at 2 a.m. to ask if I was okay, and I had to decide in a split second how to answer. I kept going. I saved enough for a deposit 5 weeks later. A room in a shared house, 3 roommates, 1 bathroom. Heaven! I kept waitressing. I started reading, obsessively, things I'd never had access to or time for. Business books, biographies, personal finance. Not because someone told me to, because the library was free and warm, and I had a hunger that I couldn't fully name, something that the woman's note had made louder. Whatever you are working toward. I started figuring out what that was. What I found, somewhere in that reading, was an intersection I hadn't known existed: food and business. I had spent 2 years in diners, and I knew intimately what they did wrong and what they did right. I knew portion psychology and table turnover and the economics of a pie case. I knew what made regulars and what lost them. I had opinions, real ones, grounded ones, about what a small food operation needed to survive. I started small. I mean, as small as you can start. I got my food handler certification. I started making baked goods out of the shared kitchen on weekends and selling them at a local farmer's market with a permit that cost me $40. I made $200 my first weekend and approximately lost my mind. I made $340 the next. People kept asking if I had a website. I made a website. I taught myself on YouTube tutorials, and it was ugly, but it worked. This was not a fast process. I am going to be honest about the timeline because I think these stories sometimes compress years into paragraphs and give people a false impression of velocity. I waitressed for 2 more years while building the baked goods business on the side. I lived lean. I reinvested almost everything. The farmer's market became a small wholesale arrangement with 2 local coffee shops. The coffee shops became 4. I started doing event catering on weekends, small things, office lunches, birthday parties. At 27, I stopped waitressing. It was the scariest day of my professional life. My income from the business had exceeded my diner income for 4 months straight, and I knew logically it was time, and I still sat in my new, second-hand, less duct-taped car in the diner parking lot for 40 minutes before I went in and gave my notice. At 29, I opened a brick-and-mortar location, a small cafe and bakery in a neighborhood in Phoenix that was just beginning its transition from overlooked to interesting. I had been watching it for a year and priced the lease accordingly before that window closed. I called it Mira's. Not after the diner where I'd worked. I chose that name, which I know was also the name of that diner, because when I thought of the word, the name, it meant something to me about that time and that place, and a tired woman being seen in a booth. I told myself I'd explain it someday if anyone asked. Mira's became something real. By my early 30s, I had 3 locations. I had a small team, a real one, with benefits, because I had been the person without benefits, and I made a decision early that my business would not be built on that particular foundation. I had a commissary kitchen that supplied the wholesale accounts, which now numbered in the 20s. I had been featured in 2 regional food publications and 1 national one that sent a writer out for 3 days. I was, by any reasonable measure, financially stable in a way that would have been unrecognizable to the woman sleeping in the Accord in a Walgreens parking lot. Here is the part of the story that I have told almost no one. When I named the cafe Mira's, I put the napkin in a frame. It hangs in the back office, behind my desk, and almost nobody sees it but me. And for years, M was just M, a mystery I turned over sometimes like a pleasant, unsolvable puzzle. I didn't have a way to find her. I didn't know her name. I didn't even know with certainty that she'd meant to leave the note for me specifically and hadn't simply forgotten a note she'd written for herself. But I had never stopped wondering. 2 years ago, I was approached by a reporter from a local paper doing a feature on small business owners in the city. She asked me, during the interview, about the origin of the name. Why Mira's? I told her the true version, the whole version, including the note and the woman with silver hair and the napkin in the glove compartment. The reporter got a little quiet and then asked if I'd ever looked for her. I told her I wouldn't even know where to start. The piece ran on a Sunday. By Tuesday, I had over 200 messages. Most of them were people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness. Some were people asking if I was hiring. A few were people who thought they might know who the woman was. And one specific message from a woman in Scottsdale was different. She said her name was Patricia. She said her mother had a name Margaret, who had gone by M her entire life. She said her mother had passed away 14 months prior from pancreatic cancer, a long illness diagnosed not long before that November Tuesday. The woman in the booth had said she'd had a small appetite lately. She said her mother had been a retired elementary school teacher who had moved to the Phoenix area late in life. She said her mother had been in the habit, in her last years, of doing small, deliberate kindnesses, leaving notes, overpaying, stopping to talk to people that others hurried past, and that the family had always understood this as Margaret's way of making peace with time running out. Patricia included a photo. Silver hair, glasses on a beaded chain, a particular way of sitting that was unhurried and peaceful, and suggested, yes, someone who had made a decision about how she was going to spend the time she had left. I closed my laptop and sat at my desk for a very long time. Then I called Patricia. We talked for 2 hours. She cried. I cried. She told me about her mother, the teaching career, the late life move to Arizona to be closer to Patricia's family, the diagnosis, the way Margaret had responded to the news not with withdrawal, but with a kind of focused, intentional openness. Patricia said there had been other notes, other 50s, other strangers who had probably never known who she was. She said Margaret had told her once, near the end, that she wanted her last years to matter in the small, specific way that a teacher's life matters, not in monuments, but in the particular. I told Patricia about the note. I read it to her, from memory. I don't need the napkin anymore. I have read those words so many times that they live in me. Patricia was quiet for a moment, and then she said her mother used to say that kindness was visible when it was real, and that tired kindness was the most real kind of all. I asked Patricia if I could do something. She wasn't sure what I meant. I told her that I had a cafe named Mira's and that I had named it because of that note, and that I would like, with her permission, to add something to the wall in the back office next to the framed napkin, a small photo of Margaret and a small plaque so that I knew whose face had seen me on a Tuesday night in November when I was 24 and sleeping in my car and trying to hold the thread. Patricia said yes. It's there now. The napkin in its frame, a photo of a woman with silver hair and glasses on a beaded chain, sitting unhurried and peaceful in a way that I understand better now. A small brass plaque beneath it that says, Margaret, who passed it on first. When I train new employees, I take them into that office at some point in their first week. I show them the wall. I tell them the story, the car, the diner, the Tuesday, the note. I tell them that this business was built on a woman's $50 and 8 words and 1 instruction. When you get there, pass it on. We do. I have a program now, a small, quiet one, where every month the cafe covers a week of groceries for a family in the neighborhood who is going through something hard. It's not publicized, there's no press release, we just do it. Margaret taught elementary school for 31 years. She spent her last good years leaving notes for tired strangers in vinyl-seated diners. She never knew what one of those notes built. I think about that sometimes. All the things we set in motion that we never get to see. All the notes we write that we don't know are being kept in glove compartments for years. All the moments where someone is watching us and we don't know we are being watched, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. Not in the moment, but in the long and accumulating aftermath. I hope she knew somehow. I hope something in the universe is generous enough to let people know in whatever comes after that the things they did on their small and ordinary Tuesdays were not small at all. I hope Margaret knows about Mira's. I think she'd like the pie.